pretend that I'm not, and that I'm very fluid in this. Okay. All right. So I was born in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, and I grew up there until I was like 16, and then I moved to the U.S. This image right here is a collage of my mom and dad with my grandparents' photo on top of my birth fortune, which is like my parents, when they had me, they like took me to a fortune teller and had my entire life basically fortune told for me. So like but there's like an age by age step of life depiction of what my life is gonna be, and I'm like too scared to read it, but I'm gonna collage with it, you know. I still keep the original copy though. Okay. Anyway, as an immigrant, I rely a lot on my memories of home as a source of comfort. For me, memory is one of the most instinctive way to experience culture, feelings, relationships that are no longer accessible, whether that be due to distance, translation, war, death, or simply from growing apart. So naturally, my artistic practice reflects this yearning. In my work, there has always been an interest in memory, home, and belonging. My process involves with looking at old photographs and personal images, such as birthday parties, family photo shoots, and collaging them with other found materials in cultural archives, such as the signing of the Paris Peace Accords, the 90s Vietnamese advertisements. The overlapping of the photos creates a space for me to exist where I feel like different versions of myself and different versions of my culture can belong together and live together harmoniously. One of my very important process is handmade paper. And as you can see in the show, there are a couple different pieces. The handmade paper is very important to me. I source old sketches, notes, love letters, dead house plans, and leftovers from other projects to generate the new paper. I view the process of paper making similarly to how I view my own identity. The making of the new paper isn't without evidences of the old material. It is very metaphorical for how I see myself as an immigrant person, always evolving in a foreign land, but not without the marks of my own culture. So when I collage, I repeatedly glue, paste, or peel at the image, erase away the image, that in some cases it becomes unclear where one image starts and the other one ends. These memories for me now exist on a flat plane with one another, transforming each other along with my sense of self. Another big thing in this work for me is a lot of the work relies on repetition. And I think that the repeating of, the joss paper or the repeating of family photos kind of enunciate these nuances of memory. Like even though I'm using the same images, they receive various different treatments like paint over or being peeled back more or at different scales. In that way, like the same memory, I feel that fluctuates between being coherent and clear to being clouded or overly dramatized or overly exaggerated or just being completely false. I think to that, then there comes those questions, right? Like, is the memory being entirely truthful? And can we trust the memory that we have? Or if I were to repeat the same color, the same image many times over, would it actually then reveal its own truth? Or how much of our memories are just simply projection from our current self wanting to connect to our past. And the most repeated image in this exhibition is the image of the gate. When working on this project, I started thinking a lot about my childhood home, which my dad has remodeled and rebuilt after my mom passed away. As someone who immigrated like 10 years ago at this point, I don't really have many photos of the house or even the gate. Um, I tried to recreate my memory of this iron gate through many forms, such as drawing, sculpture, painting, in order to connect to this place that once held me. Without any photographic references, the gate stands in its many forms and all are truthful to my remembering of them. And to close up my short and quick presentation and begin the Q&A, I would like to read a quick note from one of my favorite poets, Ocean Vuong. This quote is from his book, On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous. In Vietnamese, the word for missing someone and remembering them is the same, nhớ. Sometimes when you ask me over the phone, "Con nhớ mẹ không?" I flinch, thinking you meant, "Do you remember me?" I miss you more than I remember you. That's it.
Well, thank you for that, Genie. I remember the first time we met, I came over to do your studio visit while you were still in the MFA program. And the best advice I gave you at the time was be annoying. And you did, so you contacted me again, and we've been having a conversation about where your work. I've always felt strongly that your work is, your work is good, but making sure that we have the opportunity to really be engaged. And I'm very excited to be here with you to have a conversation.
No, I'm excited to be here, and thank you, Sing and Karna and everyone for giving me the platform and the space to explore and do my own thing.
Absolutely. Can you talk a little bit more about home? Do you see your home here or your childhood home really as the place that you belong?
Yeah, I think that, it's still on. I think that home has become very a complicated definition for me over the years because I lived here since I was 17, so I basically grew up here as well and also grew up in Vietnam. So there's for a long time I was really struggling with the fact that I wasn't American enough. But then when I go back home, then I wasn't Vietnamese enough for Vietnamese people either. So then there's this weird space to live in where you don't really quite belong in one place or the other place. And then so I just didn't know where my home would be. Sometimes thinking about going back to Vietnam would stress me out and stuff like that because I feel bad that I'm not more connected to my own culture. And so to me now, home is this very fluctuating thing. Sometimes it feels like home is here, where my friends are, where my families are. But then sometimes home is just where I can speak my own language, wherever that might be. I was waitressing for a little while, and then I felt for a second, I felt like my home was just speaking in Vietnamese at the restaurant, working with my coworker, and that was kind of it felt good for me at the time. So it depends on when you ask me that questions. I feel like my answer is different, but it's always been very complicated. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about the gates and for you and really, how you use repetition to hammer at that identity, really your personal identity and the memory that you share?
Yeah, the gate started as a kind of a surprising project because I've always wanted to work with my childhood home. In a way, the house was rebuilt and remodeled, and I still haven't visited the new house, so I just have no idea what it looks like, and I wanted to oh, what if I just build my old house myself here somehow? But I just never figure out how to do that. I try like a lot of different ways. I tried collaging different rooms together and didn't quite work. So I kind of gave that idea a rest until this past year. I revisited the idea and was like, okay, what if I break this down like to like step by step, room by room, and what would that look like? So then I was like, when I first enter our house, what would I first see? It's this gate, and then I try to find photos of the gate, which like non-surprisingly, actually, no photos of it because who goes around and take photos of their gate? So I just don't have any photo references of the gate at all, or that I have access to. So I just thought about like what did it look like, and I have conversations with my sister and my cousin, and like they remember it slightly differently than I do, and then so it's like this interesting thing about like our memories are also different about the same thing, and my memories of it different from one time to another. So I thought it would be interesting to try to recreate it in different ways and different materials, and just to try to show that like there's this thing that exists, but I don't know what it looks like anymore. This is just what it looks like in my head.
I know that you studied to be a graphic designer too.
Yeah.
When did you start to really do work about you?
I think once I started grad school, that's when I was like, I did a lot of graphic design and I still really like it. I think it was just there wasn't ever anything I was making that felt for like it was for me, and then I was really burnt out for a little bit. So I was just like, oh, let's scrap everything and like let's pretend that this like graphic design thing doesn't exist. Like, what would I actually make? And grad school was kind of nice that like there was this space for me to be able to play around and do all these different things. So then I just started collaging my family photos. It was just like, being a nostalgic person. I just looked through photos all the time, and then so I just started like playing around with that, and then that kind of worked out. There's like a lot of influence of design in my work. I think the grids is pretty obvious. But yeah, I think they like influence one another, but I definitely feel like because of my personal work, I also feel better about design too.
Yeah, and how has that process of art making really informed? I I come from the work. Most of my work is about identity too, and I've learned a lot about even my own family and my own heritage through the work that I've made, and how has that helped you figure out some of those barriers or those challenges?
I think through making the work, I just feel like I have more compassion for what like went on in the past. I think even like more compassion for like my family members, because like sometimes I think when I was growing up, I think that either my dad did a really bad thing or my mom did a really bad thing, but it was good to like make this work and look at photos of them all the time and then realize that they're just like human beings who do both good and bad things, which I think was what I was able to take out of my work is like, oh, to look at these people or my relationship with them and observe it from like, not from Genie, but like more holistically. They are just their own people and I am my own person and we exist together kind of thing.
Yeah, because I think you create a really good narrative about sort of your memory and in particular your parents, and through the work that you do, and I think that's something that is really reflective in what you've been creating. And, it's 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 something that it's hard to really describe unless you are really in that position to really rethink and assess that. So I just I mean I had toured a tour with somebody who came in and they looked at your work too, and they're just they're very surprised and at the amount of like storytelling that was happening.
Oh, interesting. Um, yeah, no, I think that's cool that like people can find like connect the stories together because the moment they see images of the same person keep showing up, they're like, oh, there has to be like a link here somewhere. What's their story, and like how do I relate to this person in the image or whatnot?
And I don't intend to get political, but I mean, it's very obvious, you know, of course, the U.S. relationship to Vietnam and what that has transpired over the last couple of years, and of course, even the documents in which you presented. Like, how has that also influenced the work that you created?
Yeah, I think about the politicals a lot because one of my grandpas was a Viet Cong, and so we were deeply involved with the war. And he was in prison for a really long time as well. So I really thought about, especially like being a Vietnamese person in the U.S. There's this relationship of like a lot of people when they heard that I am from Vietnam, I think the first thing that popped into their head is like the Vietnam War, which that not so much anymore, but that happened a lot when I first moved over here, and it's something interesting to like be connected, your self identity to be connected to something that is so like tragic and like so political and. I think during grad school I tried to make a documentary esque thing, a video form about my grandpa, the one who was in the war, and I think I was going in a direction where it was very didactic, where I was being very specific about like how did this happen and like how did it affect him as a person and how did the war then makes his relationship with our families change entirely, because we don't really have a good relationship with him. But I think that that way working wasn't very successful for me. I think it was like a good experiment, but I think of my work more of like I want to imply that there is a political story behind this, but I don't want to be, sometimes don't want to be like too overtly being like, this is about the war. This is just like, there are some people in here that were influenced by the war.
Do you often, I see this when I get asked questions too, and you can respond however you want, but like, do you feel that the need to come with that historical and political context is important to understanding the work that you're making?
Well, that's a good question. I think that with the historical and political like context, it adds to the work, because then it situates the, I don't want to call them the characters, but these people in my work, where they're from, what influenced their decision, what kind of climate they were growing up in. And I think that without knowing that piece of culture, I think it makes the work lack something, but I don't think it entirely derail it.
Absolutely. I mean, I used to have to give almost a history lesson
Yeah.
before I talk about my work, but now I kindly tell people don't ask me.
Yeah, I think I just like try to explain less and like let the audience do the work. I explain a little bit just because it's, you know, sometimes it's hard to be a foreign person in Minnesota, but yeah.
I think you're kind of a foreign person in White Bear Lake here too.
No.
You're moving from one part, you know, just being foreign in any space, new space is foreign space. You know, I think we forget about that. You know, even being, you know, a city within a city, and you know, a state within a nation, right? And I think I appreciate what you said about like learning and more understanding about the work that you do, because I think that from the work that I've been creating to and what I see in your work is really that empathy building part that is really important.
Yeah. No, for sure. I think that was like my favorite thing about making this work is like, because like I think before making the work, I just missed these people or missed this culture, and then by making the work, I was like, I think of my family or my culture in a very different way, which I think is what I wanted out of this anyway.
Well, we can see if there's any questions from the audience. Yes.
Are you comfortable sharing what brought you here at 17? It sounds like it wasn't your family members, it was something else. Am I correct?
Yeah, no, it's like not something dramatic. I just went to school.
Okay.
Yeah. But no, yeah, I came here for senior year of high school as an exchange student, and then I just sort of stayed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any additional questions?
You mentioned repetition, Genie, and like the imagery of specific people. And I know this might be cheating, but knowing your password, internet searching is really important to you too. And I wonder if you want to talk about any process around developing these newer works.
Yeah, I think I mean process for this new work. I think I was influenced a lot by the old work I was making too, and with repetition, it was born out of the fact that I felt like I have so limited sources of family photos. And there was only so many pictures I could use, and I didn't know what to do with that either. I think at one point I was like, oh my god, what if I run out of image? Like then I wouldn't have work to make. But then I just started like putting a bunch of them together, the same image, like over and over again. And then there's this like, this other, almost other kind of messaging that came out of it. That's less related to internet searching, because internet is like a vast source that I do also source for like Vietnamese, like certain Vietnamese like advertisements. That was what I was referencing a lot. And I think I still reference that with like the peeling and the pasting. The repetition was more out of the fact that there was only so many pictures of my family. Yeah.
I was wondering, can you talk about the title of the exhibit and how how you came to that title, how it came into maybe the meaning of the works?
Yeah, I think I thought of the second sources was because like, I think the first source is usually like research or fact, and the second source is just like non-fact, which is just memory. I think that's where my head was going. But yeah, like when you like rely on this other sources to make your work, which isn't entirely based on anything that was, or some of it was based on reality, but a lot of it was just in your head, so you based it on this like almost false fact.
I'm just curious, so you said your dad has redone the house,
Yeah.
built the house. So does your family not have a lot of photos or a lot of other?
You mean like of the old house?
And of your first 17 years over there?
I think we do have photos. I think this was more specifically of the gate, that I don't have a specific picture of it, but there are photos of the other rooms, and yeah, like I do use like images of, I don't think there was like pictures of the house itself, but there's images of people that were in the house, which we took, that I could reference to, and I still do have that.
I mean, I'm just curious if you're going to continue this exploration.
Yeah, oh, I see what you're talking about now.
Yeah, additional resources from your memory, but also from anything else that family might have.
Yeah, I think I wanted to, my grand scheme is I'm gonna build this full house. I don't know how long it's gonna take or what it's gonna look like, but I wanna build it like step by step. So now I'm like building the gate, And I do still want to explore what the gate looks like later on with different projects. Maybe I'll build the same sculpture, but like much larger again. And doing different kind of drawings on it. But yeah, I was thinking of doing the project with the gate for a while, and then maybe I'll move to a different room. My dad, when I was growing up, he has an embroidery company, so there was like the embroidery room where there was all these machines that were going on all the time, and so the house we were living in was so loud. Like the machine was going until like I don't think it stops. So I like wanted to do like a project about the embroidery room, but that's like that comes later, and I have sources for that a little bit too.
I don't know, I feel like I'm doing like Ellen, like kind of knowing a little bit of background, but like how does your family participate in these? And I know that you're working from your own memory a lot, but do you ever like invite your memories to kind of influence your own, or?
Yeah, I think I was mentioning it a little bit earlier where I talked to my sister and my cousin about the gate a little bit, and they had like a different memory of it. All the images that I'm using is from my dad, who he just, like take a photo of the photo and then send that to me. And so those are all the images that I use is like through conversations that I have with my dad. And then the project I mentioned earlier, where I was working on my grandpa's like video work. I did an interview, like an informal interview with my dad as well, just to kind of ask him about what he thinks of that time period, what he thinks about my grandpa in general, and how does all of that influences him. So I do want to bring my family into the work. I feel like I am doing a little bit, but not as much as I like probably could have. I also don't know if like my dad wants to like participate in this any much more than like sending me photos.
Do you ever challenge the things that they're saying from their memory? If you remember them different?
Yeah, I think we did. I mean, probably like slight challenging, but I don't know, not a full blown fight.
Has it been challenging for?
It's a stereotype. I encounter this all the time too. My parents don't know what I do. They don't know what I do. I mean, I'm Asian, you're Asian. There's an expectation for us to be some sort of mathematician. But do you have challenges of explaining the work that you're doing to your parents, and are they okay, or have they seen the work that you're doing?
Yeah. Me and my sister joke about this all the time, but whenever we like want to talk about our actual feelings, we like speak it in English because I don't know if there were words, or we just don't know how to communicate feelings in Vietnamese. That's why I feel like sometimes I have a hard time trying to tell my dad specifically. My family, my sister and cousin specifically, I have an easier time talking to them about my work. But with my dad, like, I don't think I have the vocabulary, or, like, I just don't even know how to tell him, like, what this work mean, or what it means to me, or why it feels important to do it right now. And he knows somewhat of what I am doing, but I don't know if he doesn't talk to me about how he feels about it either, so, yeah. Was that all your questions? Like, I feel like I missed some of it, or I didn't get all of it.
No, that was the question. But yes.
Okay, I have really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you both. One thought that was just coming to mind is the concept of like the memory palace, like a way of using architectural space to like unlock memories and mnemonic devices. You talked to me a little bit about having a more kind of empathetic understanding of family members in the past and kind of characters, to use your word, which I love. Are there memories that were like unlocked through this process for you? Things that were discovered through the process of doing the exhibition together?
Yeah, I feel like there was, and then now I can't think of it on the spot. But let me think about it for a sec. I don't know. I think when I was working with the birthday party, like the birthday party photos, there were like, I think there was like, it's like just such a little thing, but there's in pictures of us, of me and my sister underneath the cake, and I was like, why was it there? And then I remember that we used to have a glass table where we just slide photo underneath, and so there were just like always like photos of us underneath the glass table, and that was just like, it's very random memory. I don't know if it like plays any crucial importance, but I was like, oh yeah, that we did have that table. That we like showcases our family photos all the time.
Well, thank you so much, Genie, and for your time, and it's been an honor to do this along with you, and I for sure continue doing the work that you do and letting us know what your future holds.
Thank you so much.